So welcome. Come on in, everyone. It's so amazing to see so many people here. And again, so many familiar faces and new faces to the Metzger Fellows event, Tales from the Classroom. So if you haven't been here before or you haven't attended one of these events, you are in for a treat. So I'm going to start myself. So good evening, and thank you all for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Tales from the Classroom, presented by the Margaret Metzger Fellows. My name is Kim Barnum, and I'm the Executive Director of the Brookline Education Foundation, the proud host of tonight's event. The BEF is deeply grateful to the family and friends of Margaret Metzger for their vision and continued support in bringing this annual celebration to life. And I would like to take this moment to actually acknowledge the Metzger-Treese family that's here tonight. If you all could just stand so that we can recognize you. Thank you so much for coming. It's also now my pleasure to introduce someone who was instrumental in the creation of both the Metzger Fellowship and this event, which has become such a source of inspiration for the PSB community. Barbara Kleeman was a close person to Margaret and her family and was part of the original group who approached the BEF with the idea of honoring Margaret's life and legacy through this program. Please join me in welcoming Barbara to the stage, who will introduce, unfortunately, John is not here this evening. Barbara will tell you why. I'll give you that honor, Barbara, of telling you why. Barbara to the stage, who will introduce another founding member and facilitator of the Metzger Fellows.
John, I prepared all these remarks for you, and you're now feverish with 103. So you're probably not listening, but hopefully you can hear the recording. I guess as Margaret's spouse, when she passed in 2013, I met with Abby Erdman, who some of you may know from SWS, who was a very long time friend and colleague of Margaret. And we said we'd really like to kind of find some kind of project that would capture what Margaret offered to the Brookline schools. And so we approached the Brookline Foundation, and I'm really, really happy to see Kathleen here, one of the former, president, director of the foundation, and also pleased to see Elizabeth, who was the successor to Kathleen, and now, of course, Kim. So we wanted to have some kind of project and thought who could be involved, who would really be kind of a key figure in making this project work, in addition to the backing of the Brookline Foundation. And that person, John, was you. I so want to thank you, John, for all you've done for this fellowship. I don't think it would be what it is today without your leadership. We wanted someone who had some, at the time, because this was all new, had some history with Margaret, both as a colleague, and it ends up John as a student, and who really understood what she wanted to do around education and really understood what she wanted to do around training teachers and helping teachers reflect about their craft. So we couldn't have been more pleased, more grateful for what you have offered. Your warmth, your humor, and your incredible guidance of this program has been extraordinary. For me, and I think for all of Margaret's family gathered here, it has just spoken volumes of your caring for your fellow teachers, as well as your admiration for Margaret, and perhaps I might even say your love for Margaret. Thank you, John, for all that you've given us.
Good evening, and thank you all so much for being here. My name is not John Andrews. It is Zach Brokenrope, and I'm an English teacher at Brookline High School. Margaret Metzger is a larger-than-life figure in the public schools of Brookline. Long before I taught here, I was an undergraduate student at Boston University, and I read her essay, Maintaining a Life, in my junior year methods class. It was the first time I had read someone write about teaching as a real piece of passion and care and something that you could devote your life to doing in a way that wasn't clinical in the way that so often education texts are when you're reading about them for the first time. I was fortunate enough to do this program a number of years ago. I was another year I was able to MC. I'm happy to be back again. When I applied for my job in Brookline, it felt like sacred ground. I remember walking through those halls and thinking about the person whose essay I had read and admired, and who again I would return to time and time again, had taught here. It's hard to imagine the spirit of Brookline being what it is without Margaret's memory and legacy here now. So, the Margaret Metzger Fellowship is dedicated to honoring that work. We work better in a community. We believe in writing as a process of discovery, figuring out what you need to say as you do it, and that teachers' voices need to be part of our conversation around public education and discourse in this country. The fellowship aims to embody those principles. Tonight, we're going to start off with Marissa Drosos, who is a special education and ELA teacher in the public schools of Brookline, currently teaching 9th grade. Marissa, come on up.
All right. I thought 2021 was going to be my year. I needed it to be my year. The summer was not quite as I had imagined. I never fully decompressed or felt that release that had come in previous summers, those summers when after a few weeks, your body and brain finally settle. The frenetic energy of the school year finally washes away. The mind quiets after months of constantly answering 3 questions at the same time at all times. Months of making decisions, however big or small, every 3 minutes, needing to be flexible and always adjusting expectations for a class, the day, the whole year. I missed a summer that lets the mind finally quiet enough to read, to write, to take a midday nap. But not that summer. Maybe it was the lingering postpartum hormones, maybe it was the long days at home with a baby, maybe it was the curriculum work I agreed to do over the summer, or maybe my expectations of summer were just too high. By late August, I was ready, well, mostly ready to be back, or at least to start again. I thought 2021 was going to be my year. I needed it to be my year. My co-teaching partner and I spent those late August days mapping out the first days of school for our co-taught ELA classes, where a special educator, me, and an English teacher, her, worked side by side to lead our students each day. We celebrated the fact that we were not teaching all new books, that we were a team again with our rhythm in place, and that we got to teach this course again, bigger and better than the year before. I had heard the rumblings about 9th graders, how they enter high school as middle schoolers, how in the first days and weeks we would be teaching them to be students, how to find their classroom, how to write their homework in each of the tiny boxes in their planner, how to walk between buildings, how to ask a teacher for extra help. But nothing prepared me for what felt like a smack in the face when I experienced them firsthand. They entered our class. Some were bold and buzzed around the room, talking to their friends from middle school. Some wandered in and slid into their chairs, nervously glancing around the room. I too was nervous, but I hid it with my smile and practice first day of school teacher routine. I reminded myself that I had this. I thought 2021 was going to be my year. I needed it to be my year. We dove into our perfectly laid out plans, the back-to-school adrenaline coursing through us, icebreakers, norm setting, course overview, and then it happened in an instant. 1 minute he was in his chair, and the next he leapt onto the chair, hands in the air, shouting over our thoughtfully curated lesson plan. We looked at each other, trying to keep the calm on our faces, communicating just with our eyes, our secret language as co-teachers. The class broke into a mix of laughter and whispered snickers. We braced ourselves for impact and tried to right the ship. We were off course, but got ourselves upright and finished the lesson. But I felt off kilter, unbalanced. This was not how it was supposed to go. As the students packed up and hastily made their way out the door, we took a deep breath. Without saying any words, we knew this year would be different. The control I had felt just days ago as we pored over our slides, spreadsheets, and handouts was gone. Teaching is an art, but a messy art. Afterwards, we processed the lesson, laughed at the absurd moments, cringed at what went awry, and then began to plan. Because that is what we do as teachers. Reality hits, expectations go out the door, and we pivot. We rebuild and reshape at a moment's notice. 2 weeks later, our jumpy friend still had not settled. During a particularly bad class for him with a special visit from the librarian, I pulled him out into the hall to talk. He was angry, mostly silent and resistant. And then the tears came, heavy sobs. We made our way back to another classroom for some privacy. When the dust had settled a bit, we began to talk about his expectations, his frustrations, his doubts, about all that he had come into ninth grade hoping for and how it had fallen apart so quickly. He had been excited to enter this new phase of his life. High school football, new friends, a fresh start academically, but it had all felt bigger upon arrival. It had all felt harder. The stakes were higher for him here, and it was all too much, too fast. Using humor to escape the hard things didn't work as well here. He was angry at this place for being so hard, and he was angry at himself for crashing so quickly. At that moment, I didn't say what I was thinking aloud to him. Then I knew and understood the feeling of expectations crashing down, of feeling defeated before it has even really started, of feeling overwhelmed by all that is possible and all that can go wrong, of sometimes even feeling that desire to jump onto the table and throw my hands in the air. But in that moment, I listened, nodded, and validated those feelings because it is hard, so very hard. And then we talked and made a plan. Where could we and he go from here? How could we restart and reshape one step at a time? Isn't that what this job is all about too? Having our perfectly laid plans and dreams for ourselves in and out of the classroom come crashing down. And then we pick up, reshape, restart, and do it all over again for 180 days, nothing predictable and nothing certain. I'm beginning to reshape and restart again too. I now know there is never going to be my year. There will just be years, good and bad, hard and not as hard, rewarding and not as rewarding. There will be students I reach and those I don't. There will be years where my head and heart are somewhere else, and years where I can be present in each sphere of my life. There will be years when my patience is frayed before I even walk through the doors, and years where I feel unflappable. There are years of stasis, years of growth, years of rebuilding, and years of restarting. But the unknown in this job, all the things we can't predict and control, they are what makes this work beautiful. Terrifying at times, but so beautiful.
We begin recruiting for the Margaret Metzger Fellowship each spring. Our goal is always to represent a wide range of experiences from teachers in the very beginning of their career to those who are nearing its end. Our next teacher is a teacher at the beginning of his career, but one of the most passionate people I've met in my time working in Brookline. Kevin McKinsey, would you please come on up?
What do you do when faced with a group of students who are stuck in a toxic collective culture? Hide under your desk, or at least that's what I did. It was year 3 in this role, the one where things were supposed to start falling into place. Besides, year 1 was right on the heels of hybrid, and year 2 I had taught science to my homeroom. Year 3 was poised to be a normal year, teaching all 6th grade and teaching all social studies again. While some things had finally fallen into place, others had not. The dynamic of this group was particularly challenging, very much so. They pushed boundaries and at times buttons. One day in the spring, It all caught up with me in a way I hadn't anticipated. Amid an extended boundary and button-pushing moment, I found myself retreating under my desk. I was looking for an escape. Jessica, a student in that class, came to check in and ask what I needed. This small showing of care allowed me to find an out, or at the very least, my way out from underneath my desk. I carried that moment with me into the summer, using it to recharge and recalculate. I reflected on what had worked and what hadn't worked, both leading up to that moment and during it. I also spent a lot of time thinking about what kind of teacher I wanted to be and needed to be moving forward, both for myself and for my students. Come September, I was ready. It was time for a fresh start, a fresh batch of sixth graders new to the world of middle school, a new opportunity to build relationships and find joy. In addition to having my new sixth graders, I would also be doing something new myself, teaching a section of seventh grade from that same cohort the year before. Though the year before had been challenging, the prospect was still exciting. It was a new chance to build deeper relationships with students and find new joy together in different ways. After a summer of reflecting, I was ready to apply my takeaways with this group of now seventh graders. On the first day in seventh grade, I ran an Artifacts of My Life activity. It was the getting to know you time of school year. While the students already knew me, I intentionally chose artifacts that would allow them to get to know me in a deeper way. In groups, students were each given an artifact and had to make observations about it, and then made inferences about what it said about me. For one student in that class, sixth grade was hard. Fletcher was very much in the thick of that cohort's culture. Sixth grade was his first year at Lawrence, so he was new to the scene and had to navigate that. His group got a picture of me at age 5 with my grandmother and her funeral card from years later. He was initially skeptical and had the same "ugh, this is stupid" approach that I feel whenever I'm forced to do icebreakers with a new set of adults. However, it was then that I started to see that shift in him. A student who spent much of sixth grade being combative, dismissive, and at times maddening, began to turn over a new leaf. When I checked in with his group, it was clear to me that he understood the assignment, and now me. "She must have been really important to you," he said to me when I asked what their inferences were. He was right, she was. She was in many ways my North Star. For any student, but especially this particular student, to recognize that was revolutionary for me. The next day, we read The In-Group by Eve Challen. One of my colleagues always started the year off with this, and I was following her scope and sequence. In this piece, Eve describes how she has always been on the outs, and on the receiving end of her peers' taunting, mocking, and bullying. She went to a K-8 school where she had 28 students in her 8th grade class. Many of them had been together for years, and for all those years, she was the butt of every joke. That changed when a new student arrived, and others treated Eve and treated her the same way Eve had been treated. One day, Eve was presented with an offer. Students had discovered the New Girl's Journal, and Eve was invited to read it with them and make fun of it. The piece that we read cuts off before Eve reveals her choice, leaving students with a cliffhanger. For homework, students had to make a prediction. Based on the facts about Eve and the inferences they made, would she join in or would she walk away? The next class, I asked students to vote. Overwhelmingly, they thought Eve would walk away. Fletcher, however, did not. Then we heard from Eve herself. I played a video where she read her piece aloud, and it was from her that students learned that she joined in. After, we unpacked that. Some students were surprised she did. Others, not so much. 2 in particular stood out to me. Both students had been at Lawrence since kindergarten. Both were part of the collective culture and would play into it. Both shared that they felt trapped in it. While they hoped Eve would not join in, they understood why she did. "It is eat or be eaten, Mr. Mack," one of them told me. This student did not deliver that message with excitement, but with duress. This is the kind of happy accident that can happen throughout the learning process in a classroom. None of this had been planned by me. In fact, I had no idea what to expect. I had never run the activity before. However, I was so happy that the students took it in this direction. They saw themselves in the story of Eve. I saw them too. Many of them had occupied each role in the story at different times. That of Eve herself, that of the new girl, and that of the in-group. It was a powerful moment for us to share, and it was important for us to name these things and unpack them together, or at least try to. And while Fletcher did not speak up, he was emblematic of a lot of this for me. He, like the others, was trapped. He was in a difficult place, being new to this group. He had been on the receiving end of a lot, and he had also given out plenty, but as his classmates said, it's eat or be eaten. That's the collective culture he stepped into, at the same time as me. I now understood him in a new way, just as he had showed he understood me in a new way the previous classes. As the year went on, I saw him escape that trap more and more. Times would still be tough, but it was nothing like 6th grade. He had established strong friendships with new classmates who were positive influences. He even began to emerge as one of those positive influences. The first time I really saw that was at farm school, an overnight field trip to a place that is exactly what the name suggests, a farm that is a school. He sat out some poor decisions others were making to set each other off when it was time to go to bed, making my life more difficult. He also jumped right in and got everything he possibly could out of every farm experience. It was a good collaborative trip for him, and one in which he routinely demonstrated kindness and care for others. From there, I saw it more and more. He showed empathy and understanding to a classmate others struggled with. He found the way she was being treated wrong and named that. He didn't join that collective culture. And with time, our own relationship had transformed. He was emerging as an academic leader in my class, something I had always seen in him but was unable to pull out of him the year before. Our dynamic was no longer one that led to combat, but one that led to collaboration. This was true just beyond our shared space. He joined the basketball team, he would come to Model United Nations, and he would volunteer to help out his peers and his teachers whenever needed. The ultimate payoff was our K-3 field day, which our 7th graders run. He and another one of my 7th graders were assigned to the homeroom of a teacher I am close with. When it was my turn to supervise, I walked out to see Fletcher teaching the boys how to properly do push-ups. My teacher friend shared with me that he had been so sweet with her class, even helping some of the strugglers practice activities before they started. While other 7th graders approached field day with the toxic energy seemingly demanded by their collective culture, Fletcher did not. He had broken out. So how do we break a collective culture where people feel trapped? How do we set each other free and start new? How do we create an environment where we are good to one another, or at the very least, do not constantly tear each other down? Well, I don't have a perfect answer, but I do have some thoughts. Getting to know each other as real, authentic people. Building empathy, fostering understanding. Learning from the experiences of others, reflecting on our own experiences, and growing after making missteps. Together, they go a long way towards creating that type of environment. While there is not that shiny, neat bow to wrap this up in that we so often long for, there is still a way forward. Fletcher and others have found it, and so have I. Remember that even amid the chaos of her teacher crawling under a desk, Jessica saw me for who I was, felt empathy, and offered help. She gave me a way out. Collective cultures and cycles of harm can be disrupted. When trapped in one, you need an opening. You need a way out. What we can do is work to offer each other these openings, these escapes. In doing so, those who have once played off the worst parts of each other now have the opportunity to resist that. Through seemingly small choices, a shift in culture can begin. We can give each other an out.
Every summer, Metzger Fellows begin by going through a brainstorming process. We explore many prompts and find the story that makes the most sense for where we are in our career. Sometimes we know coming into the fellowship what we want to write about, and sometimes we have to let a topic go. Sarah Hassey is a great example of a teacher whose topic and story shifted in her time of writing it. Sarah is a 3rd grade teacher at the Runkle School in Brookline. Welcome up, Sarah.
By the spring of 2024, teaching was too much for me. The job was robbing me of sleep. I'd wake up abruptly at 3 a.m. every night in a cold sweat, heart pounding and panicked about my students and coworkers. It was not just one thing, instead many layers of things that were bogging me down. I was bone tired, exhausted, and not sure that I could keep fighting. It was affecting my health. It was becoming harder and harder to refill my tank. Things that used to bring me joy left me feeling numb. It was time to truly think about doing something else. A new career might be just the step I needed to take to start to feel well and whole. Okay then, let's do this, I thought. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I opened up Safari and typed in career test. The results came back. Teacher with 5 stars. I didn't want to believe it, so I moved on to another test. This one was going to find the perfect new career for me. I felt a surge of optimism. This was exciting. This can't be, I exclaimed. I got teacher with 5 stars. Let me try again. I moved to a different career test, thinking this would bring me clarity. 5 stars again for teacher. What is happening? I exclaimed loudly to my husband. I continued taking tests with the same results. Each test came back with 5 out of 5 stars for teacher as the career that most fit me. I was devastated that this quiz hadn't offered me another career path. Well, now what? I wondered to my husband. It seemed I had found my calling, but this career was demanding more than I could give. I turned to my husband, a career changer who had become a teacher later in life. He said to me, "We are so lucky to be able to work in a career that brings about such change and truly makes a difference." At that moment, I started crying. He was right. Everything felt so hard on the one hand, and on the other hand, I was flooded with memories of why I love teaching. I sobbed to him, "You were so right." We continued this conversation late into the night, yet I was not entirely convinced. I still was feeling like I wanted to do something else. Then the universe sent me a sign. One day at school, while still questioning this career, I checked my email. I received a video thank you from a student I had taught 10 years ago. When I got home later, I shared this video with my husband. What he heard was this: "Ms. Hassey, I remember being a member of 3H, which is one of the more notable memories from my time in Runkle. I do remember being a very ill-behaved kid back at Runkle and would get many reports from adults there. But you were one of the few who made me feel welcomed at school. I was able to be engaged in class, which put me in a positive direction. By being engaged in class, I was able to talk with other kids, and I made friends. Some of these friendships I still have today. I want to thank you for supporting me during that school year and being a great person to me." What a powerful message. Hearing my former student say that he was able to connect with others in our class and that he still has friendships from that time made me feel like I had accomplished a life goal. I literally could retire tomorrow and feel proud of all that I had accomplished. This was the reminder I needed. This was my now what. Then this memory resurfaced. In my second year, I had a girl in my class who loved to read. And one day I asked her, "What are you reading, Haley?" She told me about these 8 sisters who were octuplets, and each has a superpower that is revealed in each of their books. Each of their powers was essential to figuring out what had happened to their missing parents. "Wow, that sounds really good. Can I borrow it from you when you're done?" I asked her. She looked at me in surprise and said, "Yeah, I'm almost done with it. I'll give it to you then." A few days later, she brought me the book and a small bouquet of clovers that she had picked for me on the way to school. She shared over 20 books with me that year. When she was in 8th grade, she invited me to her bat mitzvah, where I gave her a gift card to Brookline Booksmith. I have other memories, too, of students writing to me that they want to be teachers because of my classroom, former students returning to visit and saying what an impact being in 3H was for them. All of these visits or messages have come at times when I felt low or burnt out, telling me to keep doing this. It is worth it. This was my now what. Then I thought of the community of people at Runkle who are social justice warriors fighting hard to be anti-racist teachers. I feel so fortunate that I have this group of people who help me to be the teacher I want and need to be for my students. Amazing collaborations have come out of this work with my coworkers, whether it was inspiring conversations, creating lessons that bring this change to the classroom, or doing PD together to further this work. I've spent most of my career dismantling my own whiteness to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of all my students. And I'm grateful to this community who supported me in this, some of the most important work of my life. A few years ago, I could see that all of this was making a positive difference in my classroom. A student had just finished sharing about her stutter to the class. I looked over at Lauren, a friend and speech-language pathologist at my school, who had been teaching a unit to my class about how people communicate in the communication part of our neurodiversity unit. And wordlessly, we conveyed, "This is incredible." It gave me chills. I felt like I had found my purpose. This student, who had been very shy and reserved at the beginning of the year, just shared something very personal and vulnerable. The class had been open and curious. They asked, "How do you stutter? How can we help you when you're stuck?" Then, in another class with Lauren, a different student shared about her dyslexia and what that looked and felt like for her. Again, the class was open and receptive to learning about someone they cared about. It was this beautiful domino effect of people being honest and vulnerable and sharing with each other. It happened again the next year with a new group of learners. This time we were sharing about ADHD. Seeing a group of students support and show empathy to each other is the most meaningful experience I've ever had. It gives you hope in bleak times and shows that change can really happen when we build communities that acknowledge, respect, and care for each other. When I think back on these memories, it clarifies for me why I teach and how I really couldn't do another job, even when I'm living in a state of dread about what it means to be a teacher right now. The career test noticed something in me that I had overlooked. I can bring about change and make someone feel significant. I am able to right the wrongs that happened to me as a learner. I can make each of my students feel welcomed and accepted in our community. I can also be a lifelong learner, and I can fight for all. This is why I cried when my husband said to me, "We are so lucky to be able to work in a career that brings about such change and truly makes a difference, because it really is the most sacred honor to be able to do this." Thank you.
Sarah, thank you for sharing that. I took a career test one time too, and it told me vice principal, and I was like, that's worse. Absolutely not. I was like, no way, girl. Anyways, one of the best things about the Metzger Fellowship to me is the fact that it gets us an opportunity to be thoughtful and reflective about our career and sit down and write. Many great teachers are lifelong learners, but in our own lives, we get busy with the kids we're raising, the things we're doing on the weekends, and we don't have time to sit down and think about the process and craft of writing. When you have an English teacher in the room, it's always helpful to build community. One of the English teachers here today with us is a colleague of mine at the English department at Brookline High School, and one of the more thoughtful and reflective people that I know. Kevin Wang, would you please come on up?
It is not uncommon for a new teacher to get riffed or pink slipped in the first several years of the job. After all, schools and budgets are complicated, and so it goes without saying that every teacher you've ever met has either experienced or known a teacher who has been pink slipped, which means it's supposed to be a part of the job. As educators, we all intellectually know that those first few years always contain the possibility that we might not come back, and so we rightly prepare ourselves for those moments mentally and emotionally. And I was prepared. I knew I was prepared. Then one day, my coordinator called me into her office to tell me the bad news. "I want you to hear it from me before you go and check your email or mailbox, but the position we hired you for isn't available next year." I fell into tunnel vision after that and only heard part of what she had to say next. "I can ask around. I know Newton South has a position open. I have a recommendation letter ready for you, and I have full confidence that you will land on your feet. I'm very sorry." You'll land on your feet. You'll land on your feet. I knew she was right. I could always find another job, but then why did I cry in my car that afternoon? Why did I not speak to any of my colleagues for weeks, and why did that same coordinator email me asking if I was okay when I would stay in my classroom all day and not go back to the office when I was done teaching? And then, One day, while driving to work, I had a realization, and it came to me in a list. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, goat, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. For those of you in the audience, you might recognize those as being the animals of Lunar New Year. If you're in the know, you might realize that Lunar New Year is a Category 1 holiday, and so you get the day off. And if you celebrate, that's even better, because then you get to celebrate with your family, and that's great and wonderful. But I have something to admit. Before I worked here, I had no idea what Lunar New Year was supposed to be. Because despite growing up in an East Asian household, I've never celebrated it. We acknowledged the year in my house, we changed the calendars, but we never went anywhere, we never saw family, we never did anything. We tracked the year, and that was it. There are many reasons for this, but the short answer is my parents wanted me to fit in, and so that meant sacrificing some things. But as the saying goes, you can't miss what you've never had, but every winter when I would see that familiar gold and red decoration in Chinatowns and in people's houses, I couldn't help be bothered by one question. Why do I feel so incomplete? Fast forward to 2016, and I find myself a young teacher at Brookline High School. It is the first semester, and one day, while deeply considering grading another essay, Liwa Shorter walks into my office and tells me to meet her after school. For those of you who don't know, Liwa Shorter is a legend. She was the Mandarin teacher for many decades at BHS, but she also ran APAC, which is the Asian American Club, and she ran the yearly Lunar New Year celebration. She was so revered that when she retired, she filled the entire STEM Commons at Brookline High School with students and staff of many generations. And even in my first year, I felt this aura within her presence. And as we sat in her classroom after school, she told me for the first, and certainly not the last time, that I have to do something. I'm to run the Asian American Asking for Courage Assembly. In her words, we haven't kept or retained a mainstream Asian American teacher who wasn't teaching Mandarin, so you have to do it. And so I did. I ran the assembly. Then she told me that Baffin needed help with an Asian American essay contest, and so I did that. She told me to attend meetings. She told me to complete workshops, and never once did I ever question why she was asking me to do all these things. I just did them over and over again. Then, one day in the wintertime, I make my way to the Brookline High School atrium, because that's where the library is, because I need to check out a book. And I hear the sound of music and drums. In the middle of the atrium, there's a lion dance. People are cheering and clapping and celebrating, and students and staff are sitting around the stairs, eating food, playing games, socializing. And in the middle of all this, Liwa comes up to me, hands me a plate of food, and says, "I'm so glad you could make it. And the food is $5. Cash only. And so, with her next to me, I witnessed joy radiate off the faces of all the students and staff, and I realized something. All of the work that she had me do, all of the meetings and extracurricular events she had me attend, this celebration that I saw, it was the answer to the question that I had most of my life. Now, I know sometimes people, when they hear this, they think, you're a grown man. You could have chosen to engage at any point. This is on you. Don't blame the world. You're not wrong. But how can I describe the feeling and sensation of being so unqualified because everyone always spoke Mandarin that was too fast for me to understand? How can I describe the feeling of being called ABC or Twinkie or banana so many times that I still have difficulty making friends with people who look like me? Because I never felt good enough. How can I describe the feeling of being a complete and utter fraud? As they say, not Asian enough for the Asians, not American enough for the Americans. But Liwa, she didn't care, and she never did. And the students didn't care either. At Brookline, nobody cared that my Mandarin was awful. At Brookline, nobody cared that I had no idea what was going on at Lunar New Year. Nobody cared that I was one thing or another thing. Nobody cared about any of that. The only thing they ever cared about was that I showed up. Because in Brookline, there are students exactly like me. There are students who are Chinese and struggle with Mandarin. There are students like me who don't feel qualified to join APAC or who are afraid to join the AAPI programs because they feel like they don't fit in, because they feel like frauds. Just last year, a student came up to me and said, Mr. Wang, can I ask you about APAC steering and LEAP and all these programs? I've always wanted to join, and I walk by the room, but I feel intimidated, and like, that's not me, but like, I kind of want it to be me. It seems like it's fun. And there are others, the Chinese-American student who dressed up as me for April Fool's Day and taught a class, the student who was adopted from overseas and just wanted to know if I ever felt stuck just because I looked a certain way, the student who wanted to go on China exchange but felt awkward because they were afraid that the mainlanders would think she was too American because her English was better than her Mandarin and her last name was Western sounding, despite the fact that she looked East Asian. Every year since I've joined. And even in a school as big as BHS, we find each other. You know, at BHS, we often talk about students finding themselves in the curriculum and in the work that they do, and I'm gonna be honest with you, sometimes when I sit in those meetings, I roll my eyes a little, because I've heard it over and over again. But then I stop myself, and I remember Liwa, and I remember Lunar New Year, and it all makes sense. So, even though my Mandarin stinks, and even though I don't celebrate Lunar New Year on my own, every winter when students play games in the atrium and perform in the auditorium, when I walk by the AAPA Leadership Advisory, when I walk in to teach Asian American literature, and when I walk into APAC because you know Liwa told me to take over the club when she retired, I slowly but surely come to the answer to my question over and over again. So, why did I feel so devastated when I got pink slipped? Because Brookline High School is more than just curriculum or activities or classrooms. It's where Liwa taught. It's where Fuzeng and Juan and Christine and Fukiko and Maria and Jason and Alfred and Megan and Yuki and Satichna and Jessica teach. It's where APAC and LEAP are. And it is where Sydney Ho is getting her start before she goes over to take over the world. But most of all, it's because this is where I see the faces of students who aren't just people who look like me. They are me. The most beautiful thing about Brookline is that it gives people parts of their lives they didn't even know they needed. And to me, that is a miracle. And to me, that is everything. Thank you.
The last step of writing is revising and letting go. Margaret once said that all papers are eventually abandoned. You have to walk away at some point. A few teachers continue to revise after we finish our week together. Erica is a good example of this, crafting and honing her story to find just the right way to express what she meant. Erica is a joy to work with, a light in our school, someone who you can count on to always lift up the room when she enters it. She is also a Spanish teacher. Come on up, Erica.
Thank you. Is this good? Okay. This essay is called 10 out of 10. As a language teacher, the beginning of my career was dominated by insecurity about being a non-native Spanish speaker. Did I really have the authority to teach this content? Was my Spanish good enough? So like many of us when we're insecure, I compared myself. I compared my Spanish to that of my colleagues. I felt good when they made mistakes. Intimidated when they didn't. 5 years in, I decided to confront that insecurity head on by teaching a class full of native Spanish speakers. Many had grown up speaking Spanish at home and were more fluent than me. 3 students, Donnie, Sophia, and Lisel, spotted my vulnerability instantly and went for it. One fall morning, they strolled in 15 minutes late, Dunkin' coffees in hand, while I was mid-passage from our AP text and started whispering in the corner. "Could you stop, please?" I asked. No, Donnie said flatly. "It's just I can't focus when you're whispering." "You're disrupting class because you can't focus?" Lisel shot back. "Everyone else is fine." "What, miss?" Donnie tilted her head. "They didn't teach you at teacher school how to get over that and keep going? You need to go back to that school because you're the only one bothered." I smiled. They told me at teacher school not to smile before Christmas, but even at their most difficult, I couldn't help but love those girls. I tried a new approach. It just feels like I'm in your living room and you think I'm interrupting your conversation with my class. Well, you kind of are, miss. Whatever, Donnie waved her hand. You're mad salty today. I don't even know what that means. You don't know what salty means? I guess you don't know Spanish or English. I guess not, I shrugged. Miss, Lisel finished strong. I low-key know you're gonna go home and cry about that tonight. Don't worry, it's fine. I was fine. They drove me crazy, absolutely crazy, but they also made me laugh and toughened me up. I knew I couldn't spend the year in their living room, so I adapted. I asked them to help me improve, to correct my errors. In return, they let me teach them complex grammar and academic writing. We got better together. On the last day, Donnie delivered her verdict. When I saw a tall white lady was going to teach me Spanish, I was like, nah. But now, I appreciate your hustle, miss. From Donnie, I'd earn an 8 out of 10. Our students are assessing us all the time. Not just in formal surveys, but through their facial expressions, the questions they ask, the emails they write us at 11 p.m., thinking we're awake. I get daily grades from my students, and they're often different. An intense grammar lesson, for one, might be the most useful lesson of the quarter, and another student's nap time. Do you think I'm a good teacher? I used to ask my mother, a veteran chemistry teacher, all the time. Yes, she'd say. But how could she know? She wasn't in my classroom every day. 5 years after teaching Donnie, Sophia, and Lisel, and a decade into my career, I had new insecurities. Sure, my Spanish was fine, and I knew how to make students feel safe, but was I truly pushing their proficiency forward? Was I actually improving their Spanish? I kept asking myself, how do I know if I'm good enough? One of the benefits of teaching Spanish is that storytelling is content. So if you tell a story, they're learning, even if the story is personal. So during a unit on parent-teen relationships a few years ago, I told my juniors a story about assumptions. When I was 17, I began, I had a boyfriend who had a baby. Wait, what? Ella interrupted. You had a boyfriend with a baby? I explained that he'd had the baby before we'd met, but I'd hidden the truth from my mother, who, for obvious reasons at the time, it felt obvious. One morning, I continued, she picked me up from his house. She let you sleep at your boyfriend's house? Ella interrupted again. Yeah. Anyway, driving home, I said, Mommy, I have to tell you something, but you're going to be mad. Just say it, she said. I can't, I said. Out with it. Okay, fine. Justin has a baby. My mother stopped the car. I paused my story in class for dramatic effect, and Ella was on the edge of her seat. What? My mother turned her head at me. This is how I raised you? To think we judge people for having babies? That story is about a lot of things. Assumptions, parent-teen relationships, honesty, judgment. I told it for many reasons. Ella had one takeaway. Why did your mother let you sleep at your boyfriend's house? Wasn't she scared you were gonna have a baby? Well, that story resonated with Ella, and our connection pushed her to work, even though Spanish did not come easily. Her accent was rough. Her friends teased her. She was in a class too advanced for her. But she kept at it, retaking tests, coming for help, learning to embrace mistakes. By year's end, she stood before the class and sang a song she'd written in Spanish to a Taylor Swift tune. She called it Ayer Noche. If you don't speak Spanish, I can't explain how adorable that error is. Look it up. On the last day she found me, I wanted to thank you. You're a really good teacher. There was my 10. Because of you, I had the courage to talk to my mom, and now I can sleep at my boyfriend's house. I readjusted my grade to an 8.5. Profe, Chloe stood after class last year, rubric in hand. Can you tell me why I lost a half a point? Chloe, you got an A, the highest in the class. I wanted to give you an A-, since one of our goals is getting you to be comfortable with imperfection, but I simply couldn't justify it this time. Okay, she whined a little, but I want a 10 out of 10. In Chloe's demand, I recognized myself. Teachers constantly discuss getting students to focus less on grades and more on learning. But I get it. I also want that perfect score. With my sophomores last year, we read an Isabel Allende story full of family secrets, dishonesty, incest, drama. For their assessment, students had to role play, really embody the 4 main characters, hashing it out therapy style, or as one student dubbed it, family beef. During our practice, students were banging fists on tables, improvising, laughing, all in Spanish. Chloe was on fire, not thinking about her grades. None of them were. That lesson, a clear 10 out of 10. There are rare days when we know we nail it. There are days we fail spectacularly. Most days fall somewhere in between. One thing falls flat, one thing we do well, another falls flat. I'll always question if I'm good enough, always seek feedback from students who teach me new lessons. Sometimes envy still gets the better of me. I'll never motivate students like Ben Berman or design curriculum like Liz Gorman. But at my best, I think, I want to learn how to do that. The first thing we tell our students when returning our papers is, don't share your grade. But it's the first thing they do. And the first thing I kind of want to do. We compare because it's human, to measure, to make meaning, to know if we're good enough. So I'll keep comparing and trying to improve because I want that 10 out of 10. What kind of teacher would I be if I didn't?
The first few years after the COVID pandemic, we encouraged teachers to not write about it yet. There was something about it that just felt too raw, too soon, and too hard to talk about in any kind of nuanced way. It was a weird time to be in education. All of us have strange stories about driving to kids' houses and throwing like copies of The Outsiders up a triple-decker like a Frisbee, or a kid announcing that the classroom had reached herd immunity, so we should be able to take our masks off, and having to explain that's not how diseases work. But our next story is a story about COVID, and it's an important one. This story captures some of what it felt like to go out and return to school. And we need to start talking about those stories too. So Meredith, will you please come on up? Meredith is an art teacher at Baker School in Brookline.
This is called Archways. As teachers, we are meant to make it work. Perseverance through challenge is not merely an intellectual concept or habit of mind, but a daily practice. Manage it, fix it, make it work. My classroom is a former locker room space. We know that. We know that because it's directly below the large gymnasium. And in the back stairwell, there is still a sign that reads girls' locker room. The windows are small, about the size of a kid's backpack, and a good 6 feet up the wall. The girls' locker room was divided into 2 spaces that share one heavy wooden door. At the time that I will describe in this essay, an average of 5 classes took place on each side of the subdivided spaces, but on different timetables. So I might be teaching a 5th grade class while a 2nd grade class would enter the door and walk through our space to get to their half of the room. Noise buffering between the 2 spaces was and is non-existent. For a while, we hung some rugs on the walls in a futile attempt to muffle the sound waves. The sound and vibrations from kids running and bouncing balls in the gym above adds to the general cacophony experienced in the room. As there was little I could do about the sounds, I thought I could cut down on some of the visual noise by blocking the view of the incoming class. I placed our 2 storage cabinets perpendicular to each other at the front of the space so that they created an opening about the width of a door. I think many of my students knew that I secretly, and times not so secretly, wished for my own doorway. 4 7th graders decided that they were going to help. "Mrs. Ritter, we're going to make you a door," they announced, with the beautiful mix of absolute confidence, caring, and naivete that can only be found in the human 7th grader. Their high spirits led us through some logistical obstacles. When would this happen? What would it be made of? Hundreds of students need to pass through it every week, so would it fall and hit a 1st grader in the face? The classroom sink was on the other side of the cabinets, so we couldn't have a barrier to that. I steered them towards the idea of an archway that could suspend above the 2 cabinets. This arch would denote the entrance to the art room. It would be colorful and personalized to indicate that students were entering a welcoming and creative space. Because we had other projects to work on during our once-a-week 45-minute class period, the kids decided they wanted to use their free time to build the arch. My prep and lunch period aligned with their Friday lunch and recess, so they came to my room every Friday for probably 5 or 6 weeks. The Friday group grew from 4 to 5, and then 5 to 7 as more students wanted to join in. It eventually grew to a team of 9. It was the perfect project-based learning experience, and it was fascinating to watch which roles each student took on during this unstructured time. Some became directors, some doers, some dreamers, some cheerleaders, and at least one was really just there to have a place he felt he could belong. I did offer some directions on measurement and angles, but mostly how to listen to everyone's ideas. Perhaps I swayed the group towards creating an archway instead of a doorway, not only for practical reasons, but because I had archways on my mind. I was trying out a new clay project with my 8th graders that year. They were designing archways that symbolized a transition in their lives. This could be one that had already occurred or was yet to come, such as moving on to high school. To begin the project, we defined the term liminal as relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process, occupying a position at or on both sides of a threshold. We looked at Japanese torii, Chinese moon gates, triumphal arches in Europe, and the Azadi Tower in Iran. All of these arches and gateways are designed to denote sacred spaces or commemorate cultural achievements. Meanwhile, the 7th graders worked hard on the archway each Friday. They painted it with blue acrylic, added white and green stripes with tape. They cut out cardboard circles about the size of a tape roll, and each of the students painted a mini composition to add their individual voice to the group project. Also, lest anyone be confused about the space that they were entering, the letters A, R, and T were cut out from cardboard, shined up with metallic Sharpie, and given pride of place at the top of the arch. I remember the Friday that the arch was finally done and ready to install. We had an arch party, and music was playing. I was very pregnant with my first child, who would arrive exactly 3 weeks from the day somebody brought in donuts. We took smiling, celebratory photographs underneath the arch. It was special to look back at these photographs, and still is. The date of the arch party was Friday, March 6th of 2020, exactly 1 week before school shut down. That 1 week was a strange one. The Boston Biotech super spreader event hit the news, and tensions were rising. At the time, I was a traveling teacher in the district, and although my home base was Baker, I taught at Lawrence on Thursday mornings and Lincoln on Thursday afternoons. I remember my first class arriving at the Lawrence Art Room door on March 12th. 9 months pregnant and not knowing what to do to prepare for seeing 100+ people a day amid the spread of a deadly virus, I had donned a pair of latex gloves. The third grade homeroom teacher took one look at me, clearly referencing my giant stomach, and said, "What are you doing here? You should go home." "I wore gloves," I said in response. Giving birth and becoming a parent for the first time in the onset of a global pandemic could be its own essay, full of love, but also fear, anxiety, and isolation. For the purposes of this essay, just know we persevered. I was originally planning to be out on maternity leave for the remainder of the year, but I ended up going back early because everyone was at home anyway, and I missed seeing people. I popped into Google Meets and attended the 8th graders' drive-by graduation, which I think will always be one of the most festive, fun, and meaningful graduations ever. The first time I entered my classroom in September of 2020, I remember walking under the arch. The cardboard bent and wilted now from the summer heat, but amazingly still attached to those two cabinets. Instantly, I felt as though I had stepped back into March 12th. Almost everything was exactly where it had been on that day, right down to the couple of colored pencils and erasers that inevitably end up in the art room floor at the end of a busy day. And yet, I felt out of place. The space was the same, but I was not, and we were not. We had passed through a liminal space of collective trauma and shared but distinct experiences. A suspension and transformation of school that I certainly never saw coming. And here we were on the other side, changed. But the question could be asked, were we on the other side? There was still so much to come, so much to do. We had to prepare to have half of the students in person while the other half were at home. We were creating online lessons, running Zooms, and what do you do when a first grader is running in and out of the screen, chasing his younger brother and bopping him on the head with a giant shark stuffed animal? Preparing packets of materials to be sent home and boxes of supplies for the first return students, and figuring out how to don a mask, a face shield, and a microphone while teaching hundreds of students a week, but not getting too close to any of them for more than 15 minutes at a time. The classroom space needed to change. I had to take the student-made archway down prior to us all returning in person. 6 feet apart mandates meant that everything in the space needed to be rearranged in order to triple the number of tables and desks in the space. Tables that once supported 4 or 5 artists now held 1. It often felt like the distance between everyone was not only physical. I noticed this in particular with my 7th grade arch builders, now in 8th grade. There was a moment with Danielle, a student who I remember as taking on the role of cheerleader during our arch building days. Chatty, bubbly, and fun, she had been a student who brought positive energy to the group. Returning to school, I saw this once cheerful student sitting in a row, staring ahead, generally quiet. Although she was very pleasant and seemed fine, she felt distant. The joy in togetherness and community that she had energized and been so energized by was gone. Another student from the group, Isaac, was part of Brookline's Remote Learning Academy for 8th grade. As I no longer taught him, he emailed me to ask if we could do a Google Meet. He was lonely. It was hard for him to connect with people. His family's Wi-Fi could get overloaded, so work and school took priority over social connections. I was glad for the chance to talk with him. Loneliness was not the only feeling we carried during this time. There was fear, stress, exhaustion, guilt. Seeing the numbers of deaths and infections rise, tracking them by state and county, and hoping that each day would bring us closer to a vaccine and maybe finding the other side of this liminal space. And still, we persevered. But despite our perseverance, our make-it-work approach, I wonder if we need to take a moment and build an Arc de Triomphe in recognition of our efforts, in recognition of the stress and the sadness, the losses, the anxiety, and the moments of joy in spite of it all. The ways that we were still there for our students, for our colleagues and families, finding new opportunities and new modalities to connect and support each other. And is the arch even a right metaphor for the liminal space? This transitional or irregular time that we experienced, was it an archway? Or maybe a tunnel? How do we even know when we're on the other side? The masks and fear may be subsiding, but some of the demands have only increased, and I encounter new opportunities to practice perseverance. I saw the highest number of students yet in my half locker room last year, 515 a week. And let's face it, some people don't have that many Facebook friends. My sections of 6 through 8 had 24, 25, and even 26 students. It makes it hard to really get to know the kids and form those connections that I've come to find make all the difference. Isaac stopped in to visit last year. He's doing very well and headed to college this year. It's a little amazing to think of my 7th grade arch builders as going to college, and my own daughter, born 3 weeks after school shut down, turned 5 and now has a 15-month-old little brother. Time marches on, and we persevere. Being in the relatively unique position of teaching 9 grade levels, I get to follow a lot of grades into the future. The kindergartners, who I first met masked and in strict rows, last year were in 4th grade, sitting in groups, laughing, working together, and experiencing all the beautiful conflict and joy that it takes to be in community. I even got to join one of their classes for a Friday afternoon karaoke session last year. Back in 2020, I never would have thought that some of those same little kids whose faces were half covered with just their eyes visible would someday be belting out "Living on a Prayer" with me at top volume. Likewise, the current 4th graders current 4th graders who joined Baker School in 2021 with a chaotic bang, reconfirming for all of us the importance of preschool, are finding their flow. They're doing great and they're persevering. Yet while time moves on and things improve, it's important to pause. The pandemic happened and it brought with it intense challenges. And while we had a signifying collective start to this transitional time the day that school shut down, I think it will be up to each individual to mark the next moments of transition for themselves. I think this essay is mine. My archway to mark a significant time with great impact. And this is, in a way, an arch party. I'm sorry that I didn't bring donuts. Like the art room arch, this essay was created with thought and care, with the help of coworkers and a supportive teacher. We all need this time to pause in our perseverance and take space and time to stop and think, to name and appreciate where we have been, where we are going, and the space in between. Thank you.
As we wrap up tonight, we just want to take a second to thank a few people. One, thank you to the BEF for the incredible work that you do. Brookline is a tremendous once-in-a-career place to work, and a large part of that is not just the teachers and the students, but the families and the organizations that make this a livable place to work and to grow old in our careers. 2, I want to thank the fellows who for the past 10 years have gotten on the stage and shared their stories. It's an act of vulnerability and love and trust of the people in this room. And then finally, yes, absolutely. And then finally, thank you to Margaret's family who have supported this and show up every year and make this an event that is wonderful to come to. I began tonight by saying that Margaret was a larger-than-life presence, and I hope that you see how her spirit continues on in the teachers who are here, and that sometimes larger-than-life is just the right size. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great night.
So before you all take off for the reception, I just wanted to again and give a special thanks to Zach Brokenrope, who stepped in at the last minute. Talk about Zach got the call at 3 o'clock this afternoon that he needed to be here by 5. And he rose to the challenge, and which I knew he would. And I want to, again, thank the fellows. This was magnificent. You probably saw me crying over there. And thank the Metzger Fellow Committee. Gavin Andrews is the chair of the Metzger Fellow Committee, and they would like to thank the Metzger Fellows themselves. So, Gavin.
We will keep all of us from our party, from our art party, as Meredith said. But I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone who makes this program possible. It's such a privilege to be a part of the Brookline community, to be a parent in the Brookline community, and to have a moment where we get to pause and reflect and appreciate Brookline's most precious resources, which are our educators and our staff and our administrators. So it's really a privilege to be part of this program, and to all of you make it possible for the Education Foundation to lead. So thank you. These flowers were just a teeny token of the appreciation from the committee to all of you. And let's go out into the lobby and celebrate. Thank you.